Welcome everyone to episode 1 of Izuna Talk. Today we're talking with an amazing style player for both for Bayonetta and for Wonderful 101, one of my favorite actually. Please welcome Setnaro. How are you
Hello
doing, man?
there.
How are you doing, man?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Oh yeah. I was actually looking forward to this.
Yeah, so was I. When you messaged me about this, I was
Mm-hmm.
actually pretty stoked because it always makes me feel how do I say it? I always feel kind of special when I get included in these sorts of things. It's
Uh huh.
it's it's so much fun because it makes me feel like I'm significant when it
Oh, you
comes to
definitely are.
these to this kind of community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, good
Because
to
I
good
because
to
I don't
hear
really
you.
think too much of it myself. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's a little side hobby of mine.
Yeah, of course, but you're pretty well known in the style community, I guess. I think.
Right. Yeah. Just I'm known in the corner.
You have your niche. Come on.
Of course.
So, like the first question I pretty much ask everyone, I'm curious, how did you start playing games? Like, what was your first video game, if you remember? What was your first experience? And what was the point when you started really getting into the hobby and being passionate about it?
All right. My very first video game, like the game that sort of well, let's see. I know the very first video game I actually played was Super Mario Brothers.
Okay.
This was like a long time ago. I
Mm-hmm.
think I was 3 or 4 years
You
old.
started with classics?
It started with the classics, of course, like way back in like 1990.
Mm-hmm.
I was living in California with my family, and during Christmas time, my dad went out and he bought an NES that came with the Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt bundle.
Okay.
Uh, that was like my first venture into video games, but I actually wasn't obsessed with the Nintendo platform. It was a great video game system, and I know I enjoyed playing it a lot, but I wasn't too obsessed with it at the time because I had other interests. I was just a young kid, and there were so many things I was absorbing.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, um, I remember my mom would also buy me a bunch of little coloring books and doodle pads, and I would also be
Yeah, of
drawing
course.
all day. It wasn't until my family and I moved to South Florida. I
Mm-hmm.
think I was 6, 7 years old. We went into a service merchandise, and I remember seeing a Sega Genesis kiosk,
Mm-hmm.
and it was displaying Sonic the Hedgehog. And I
Oh, okay.
remember, like, when I saw that, that was what completely changed my life. Because when I saw the game in action, seeing Sonic like on the screen and seeing the vibrant colors and everything in movement, that was when I was like, "Oh, I want this. I want Sega. I want Sonic." And I remember it's like it would be an entire year before I would actually get a Sega Genesis,
Mm-hmm.
and by the time I did get one, it came with Sonic the Hedgehog 2 bundled in, and that was I even though I was introduced to games with Super Mario Brothers and playing on the NES, it wouldn't be until the Sega Genesis would come into my life that video games would end up being my passion. So, yeah, so even though Mario was the beginning, Sonic was the one that
Sega was the
solidified it.
one through love.
Right. So growing up, I was always the Sega fanboy. You know how there was always those territories about Nintendo versus Sega.
Uh-huh.
When I was in school, almost everyone I knew was a Nintendo kid. I was the
Genesis does
only
what
doofus
Nintendo
that
don't.
was right. Genesis does what Nintendo don't. I was on the Genesis side, and it was a lonely battlefield, but I was obsessed with Sonic the Hedgehog. That was my calling. That would be where my gaming would take
Mm-hmm.
me. And since then I would continue to be a Sega fanboy, not just Sonic the Hedgehog, but I would also just try out all sorts of random Sega games. Growing up, I would get the Game Gear, and later on I would also get the Dreamcast, and I think the Dreamcast was and I still think the Dreamcast is the best console out there because it brought forth so many amazing arcade games like Crazy Taxi and
No, Crazy Taxi is
Marvel
great.
vs. Capcom. and Power Stone. Oh god, those games are magnificent. I freaking love the Dreamcast. I still have it plugged in,
Oh wow.
even though I got rid of my Xbox 360 and my Wii U, I still proudly have my Dreamcast hooked up. I ain't gonna get rid of that.
So a Sega fan through and through.
Exactly.
So and why and how did you start with action game instead?
So my my experience with action games was kind of broken
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't start early on with games like Devil May Cry or God Hand or anything like that because there was a time when I had a PS2. Like I remember my family got me a PS2 somewhere around 2002, but unfortunately, I had it for a very short amount of time. Like I think it was only about 6 months because unfortunately, after those 6 months, when my family and I went on vacation, we came back to find out that we were victims of a robbery. I
Oh
lost so
Jesus,
many things. It was a horrible experience. So
I can imagine.
I was not lucky enough to hold on to a PS2, so I was not able to enjoy all these PS2 games that were available at the time, so games like Devil May Cry escaped me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up skipping out on the PS2 generation. I moved on to the GameCube, and years would go by, and I would start grabbing new consoles like the Xbox 360. And since I'm a Sega fanboy, around the time when the 360 came out, it was when Sega had made an announcement that they would partner with Platinum Games to release 6 games. Now, I
Okay.
never heard of Platinum Games before, and I didn't know anything about their history. Like I had no idea who Hideki Kamiya was. I had no
Mm-hmm.
idea what Clover Studios was. All I know is that when Sega made this announcement that they wanted to pursue with Platinum Games, and I saw their first preview, which was Mad World, I was like, wow, this looks pretty cool. Let me follow along and see what games they release. And I remember picking up Mad World, and I had fun with that game. I'm not going to say it's the most amazing game I've ever played, but it
No,
was
it's pretty damn fun.
it's really fun. If anything, I think the one thing I really loved about the game was the voice work. Because when you play
Okay.
the game, you have, like, these 2 announcers. They those 2 announcers are amazing because,
Oh
like,
yeah.
on the one side, you have John DiMaggio playing, like, this rough guy who has no sense of, what's that word I'm looking
He
for?
gives no
It
fucks.
is he doesn't give a fuck. He
Yeah.
just says whatever's on his mind. But what was mind blowing isn't just the fact that it's John DiMaggio doing the voice of this announcer, but his partner is uh is a guy voiced by Greg Proops. And the reason why that's mind blowing to me is because at the time I was obsessed with this TV show called Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's such
Oh,
a
what is that?
fantastic comedy show. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I don't.
Ah, no,
Have you
I
heard of it?
didn't.
Okay, so Whose Line Is It Anyway is an improv show where basically you have these 4 actors come up on stage and they are given a subject or a theme and they just act it out. They do improvisations, and it's
Oh, really cool.
super hilarious. And one of the actors that was on that show was Greg Proops. And when I heard that he was going to be jumping
Oh
in to
wow.
do the
Okay.
voice work for Mad World, I was like, whoa, this is so cool. That was part of the reason why I loved Mad World a lot. It wasn't the gameplay, it was just the voice work that went into it.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so moving forward, after Mad World, that was when Sega announced Bayonetta,
Of
right?
course.
And I had no idea what Bayonetta was. All I know is like the game looked cool,
Mm-hmm.
and when it came out, I went ahead and bought the game and I tried out Bayonetta, and this is the part that blows people's mind. I did not like Bayonetta when I played it. I actually
Okay.
hated the game the first time around. Like I was one of those scrub lords that I I I would always get so frustrated anytime I would get a stone reward, stone statues. It was just so it was frustrating. Like it left me feeling like, oh my god, I'm not good at this game. And it didn't help that Bayonetta tends to be a very punishing game. like
Oh
super
yeah,
punishing.
absolutely.
Anything you try to do to help yourself out when you're in a bind just sort of results in you just dropping down to a stone reward. And by the time I made it halfway through the game, I said, "Screw it! I'm rage quitting this game. I don't
Okay.
want to have anything to do with Bayonetta." Right. So I gave up Bayonetta, but I still continued to support Platinum games because after Bayonetta came Vanquish, and I actually did enjoy Vanquish quite a lot. It's
Oh
it's a
wow.
super
Okay.
fun shooting game, and I loved it a lot because at the
Kind of.
time I was also obsessed with games like Gears of War. I still
Oh
love
okay.
Gears of War to this day. I'm
S-
currently playing Gears 5, but
Uh
when
huh.
Vanquish came out, I think Gears of War 2 was out in the market. And so when I was playing Vanquish, I was like, whoa, this feels like a very souped up Gears of War. This is so much fun. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I had no complaints with Vanquish.
So kind of
So
strange you find it more accessible than Bayonetta. Like it actually,
yeah,
and if it's
Vanquish is more
harder,
accessible than
it's a lot
Bayonetta.
harder, especially on
Mostly
Godard.
I feel like Vanquish is more accessible simply because it's not telling you that you're doing a bad
Oh okay.
job.
Yeah. Sure.
It's more like it just gives you a score and then that's it. You get to keep going. So that's why I enjoyed Vanquish. It was also a very short game, like you could beat it in 5 hours, but
Mm-hmm.
what made it fun is that you could always go back do better. I actually didn't replay Vanquish that much. All I know is like on my first playthrough, I had fun, and then I would call up my friends and be like, "Hey, dude, you got to come to my house. So you could try out this one awesome game." And
Mm-hmm.
Vanquish ended up being that center of attention. So okay, so this was how I was with Platinum games all the way through. I would just enjoy the games. I didn't really think much of it. It wasn't the kinds of games that made me want to get better at it. Years go by, and the Wii U console comes out, right?
Okay.
And I bought the Wii U because my little brother really was stoked about the new Mario game that was coming out at the time, which was Super Mario 3D World.
Okay.
So I decided, let me go ahead and buy this game or buy this console, and then that way I'll be able to buy Mario 3D World. And it just so happened that during one of the E3 presentations that I was watching through IGN's website,
Mm-hmm.
it was when I heard about this one little game that at the time was called Project P100.
Okay.
And when I saw the gameplay footage for that, I don't know what it is about the gameplay footage, but something about it just spoke to me. Like when I saw the gameplay and when I saw the the unique traits that it had, the whole idea about controlling 100 superheroes and that you could draw out the shape in order to create weapons, that just sounded so amazing to me. It sounded so cool. And when I heard it was being made by Platinum Games, I was like, "Oh snap! It's that
It's the
team
guy
that
from
was with
Vanquish.
Sega. Yeah, it's those people." And I was like, you know what? This game looks so cool. And I started following along with everything having to do with Project P100, which of course eventually it would be named
Wonderful
Wonderful 101
101. Yeah.
later on. And then that was when I started learning about Hideki Kamiya, especially
Mm-hmm.
when Wonderful 101 had its own Nintendo Direct where Kamiya was the one hosting it, doing a parody of Iwata, with the whole directly to you kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I started learning who he was. And then before Wonderful 101 was actually released, I remember this guy online by the name of Soar started making tutorial videos. And so I was like, man, if I want to enjoy Wonderful 101, I really need to start paying attention to all of these things. And that's what I did. I was paying attention to everything Soar was explaining. I also downloaded the demo and I started replaying it over and over and over. By the time Wonderful 101 came out, I finally had an idea of how the game worked, and I just became so obsessed with this game. It wasn't just
Mm-hmm.
because of the colors, it wasn't just because of the concept. It's just that the gameplay was also really satisfying. There was just such a very satisfying aspect to it that I loved. Um,
So yeah, you
and
got you
so
got
so
hooked
yeah,
on
so
the
Wonderful
mechanics
101,
thanks to the tutorials.
yeah, I
You started
started
to
learning about
understand the game better.
yeah, I started learning about mechanics. I started learning about the enjoyment about digging deep into a combat system in order to make the most out of it.
Mm-hmm.
How rewarding it feels to get a high score when you understand the system. those were the things that I started learning about through Wonderful 101. Um, it got to a point where I had so much fun with Wonderful 101 that I started discussing the game online with some people, and this was when I started learning about this community on 4chan that went by the name of, Crazy Games General.
Okay.
And here, this was where I was watching these people create these style videos with games like Devil May Cry and Vanquish, and it was like, "Wow, you could do that with these kinds of games? You know what? Let me take a shot and do something with Wonderful 101." This
Mm-hmm.
was when I started learning about the
Okay.
world of style videos, and
So that
because I
was
had
your.
so much fun with Wonderful 101, I wanted to see if there was a way I could m to make the gameplay that Wonderful 101 has and turn it into something that feels stylistic, like if you were to
Mm-hmm.
watch someone playing Devil May Cry. And making that video was such a thrill.
Oh,
This
so
was
you
when I
didn't you
realized,
didn't
wow, this is so much
watch
fun doing these kinds of
you
videos.
didn't watch style videos specifically for Wonderful 101. You watched like the usual Devil May Cry stuff, and then
Yeah,
decided that you wanted to apply it
b
to.
because of the group, like, I started
Mm-hmm.
learning about all of these other games that existed, like Ninja Gaiden and God Hand, and it's amazing watching all these people going nuts with these kinds of games, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to take a shot with Wonderful 101. And yeah, even though my very first Wonderful 101 combo video felt a little sloppy, it's still a video that I'm proud of because this was when I first started dabbling into combo video.
Yeah, of
And
course.
after I
So you started
did the
immediately
most
started with like style play in mind.
yeah, this was when I started having the mentality of style play.
Mm-hmm.
And so after I finished playing Wonderful 101 to its fullest, it was then I realized, wait a minute, if Wonderful 101 is this much fun and it was made by the same people that did Bayonetta, what if I go back and try my best with Bayonetta? And so I decided to go back to Bayonetta after I had rage quitted it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the same thing with Bayonetta, what I did with Wonderful 101. I started going online and looking at tutorial videos. I started watching these videos created by this girl that goes by the name of Yoshesk. She does
Yeah.
some fantastic Bayonetta related
Yeah, yeah, an amazing
content.
player.
Yeah,
Indeed.
so it was because of her videos that it inspired me to sort of improve myself
I'm
and
pretty sure
do
I
something
learned
with
how to
Bayonetta.
dodge offset from her, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Like that dodge offsetting tutorial is what really helped me out the most. That
Mm-hmm.
that dodge offsetting tutorial is what made me realize, wow, if I learn to do this, I can actually have more control over Bayonetta. And once again, this was when I started learning about the mechanics. I started learning about the 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 the, the deepness or the depth that Bayonetta offers, right?
Okay.
And after I started learning about that kind of mechanics, it was little by little, I started realizing, wow, Bayonetta is a lot of fun when you just goof around with the mechanics. I didn't care about getting a high score. I didn't care about getting pure platinum. It was way more fun just dancing around with the enemies and juggling them in the air. It's a thrill, it's such a cathartic experience to be able to manipulate enemies when you're skillful, and that's when Bayonetta ended up being my favorite game. So Bayonetta went from being a game I hated and that I was ready to get
Okay.
rid of it, but then it slowly crawled up and it's now one of my top favorite games out there. Second only to Wonderful
Oh
101
wow.
as my top favorite game of all time.
Mm-hmm. I
So
think
yeah,
that's
that's
I think that's actually pretty common. Like I talked with a lot of people that started with a game and it didn't initially click, so they didn't
mhm.
really like it, and then something like clicked on them either because they found out some mechanic, so hidden mechanic, or they found a community online that helped them, and then they started loving the game. So
Yeah.
I think it's pretty common. And on this topic, actually, we talked with Rang on
Mhm.
the last episode about this. But what do you think about accessibility from this point of view? Like you said you
Uh
didn't really like the game until someone else through like YouTube tutorials and stuff like that explained to you the mechanics. So stuff like dodge offset, how to do combos and all that. So do you think games should action games specifically should they be more open about explaining this stuff? So other than the basic tutorial, also explaining stuff like dodge offsets and stuff like that, or it's the discovery of those hidden mechanics is an integral part of the game, even if some people like you initially don't really understand them immediately, and so they might get turned off by the game.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it is a very tricky subject
Mm-hmm.
because on the one hand, I do think it's extremely important that a game does its best to explain everything to the player of what the game offers.
Okay.
But I also think that it's the thin line. It's the really thin line that makes it difficult to do such a thing because if you explain too much to the player may feel extremely overwhelmed with too much information. Because that's
True.
something that I
Mm-hmm.
see when it comes to Bayonetta. Because even though Bayonetta doesn't explain a lot to the players with all the in-depth mechanics that it offers, just the regular information that it conveys to the players, like all these combos that you can do, that alone is already overwhelming to the players to the point that it kind of forces new players to sort of find the one strategy that works and stick with that
Mm-hmm.
and never really break out of their comfort zone. So it's really hard to say, but I do think it's more important to I think it's more important for a game to be a lot more accessible to the player than it is to sort of keep that stuff away from them. But yeah, discovery of a mechanic is also key, and
Mm-hmm.
this is where things starts to get fuzzy because sometimes you don't know if these sort of discovery is something that the game intended you to do. It's kind of like with games like Devil May
And
Cry,
inertia and all that stuff. Yeah.
where, like, I'm not gonna say, the inertia was unintended. I'm
No,
almost
it
certain that
totally
it
was.
was intended,
No,
but
I don't think so. Especially with what happened with Devil May Cry 5 and what they said in interviews. I don't really think they knew what inertia was.
hmm, alright. Well, I'm not Devil May Cry is not my ultimate
Mm-hmm.
forte, so whatever I say, don't
I know, of
don't
course, of
take it
course.
as the end all be all. So, like, I'm only taking it from what I hear from the outside. Whether or not inertia
Mm-hmm.
was intended, it led to a lot more cool things that a player can pull off. You
Of course.
like guard flying, Um, but that's stuff that isn't entirely necessary to learn if you just want to get good at the game and just get all the high ranks. Those are things that's an additional step that a player
Mm-hmm.
should only learn if they want to just make the most out of the combat, if the combat system is cathartic for them to just goof around with. So I think in that sense, the things that a game should convey to the player should only be the things that's important for improving in the game's own goal, which is to get a
Okay.
high score. So, like for Bayonetta, I do think it's important that it explains to the player what's important about getting a high score. Because as it is, Bayonetta doesn't actually tell players what you need to do to get a high rank. It doesn't tell you like how the score system works. It doesn't say like, oh, your score resets if you don't attack an enemy after three
Mm-hmm.
seconds. It doesn't say anything about that. So stuff like that would be a lot more beneficial. But all the little cool things that you can do through style play, like ground bouncing enemies, or well, there's no actual official term for these things because they're so niche that even the community for the Bayonetta fans have troubles coming up with names for these. But I call them OTGs
Okay.
because it kind of plays like it does in a fighting game where, like, like how in some fighting games when an enemy falls to the floor, you could do a move that if you hit them from the floor, it
Mm.
pushes them back up so you could continue doing your
Yeah,
combos,
so a
which
lot of
is it's
restance
good.
and stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, those kinds of resets, you can actually do that in Bayonetta. They're not necessary
Mm-hmm.
for getting a high score, but it's there as an extra little move that you could do to flaunt with the enemies. That stuff isn't necessary to teach the players. That should be something that the players should discover on
Mm-hmm.
their own. But stuff like how to get a pure platinum, dodge offsetting, which I think it is very important to tell players, that's stuff that should be conveyed to the players. But yeah, you need to sort of leave the really niche stuff as the things that should be left for the players to discover.
Okay.
So yeah, it's I do think accessibility is more important.
Okay, so
And when
you
it comes to games like Wonderful 101, accessibility should be even more important because that game is just so wild with mechanics that it's really difficult for an average player to get into because you're jumping into a game that has a brand new concept that you rarely, if ever, see in other games. The whole thing about you draw a shape to make a weapon, that itself is already an open-ended
yeah, yeah.
system and it
It
requires a lot
also
of
it
explanation, you
also
know?
was a kind of confusing because it started with on the Wii U. Like a lot of people
Yeah.
thought they you should like actually draw the shape on the Wii U pad.
Oh yeah, that's another thing, right? Because it was on the Wii U, people misunderstood and thought, "Oh, you're forced to use a
Mm-hmm.
touchpad. I'm out of here. I don't want to use that." So I understand why people are like that, and that's why it's more important now than ever that these kinds of details need to be explained more to the players. Like, hey, you have more options. You know, you have more options. You don't need to just use the screen. You can use the right stick. That is stuff
Mm-hmm.
that needs to be made more clear to the players.
Okay, so you want a balance pretty much. Like the fact this stuff that is
Yeah,
needed to
it's a
succeed
hard
should be
balance. It
explained,
really
and the
yeah,
other
stuff
stuff
like
that
that should be explained.
okay, okay. Well, that's it. That's a good point. Actually, I'm more on the like discovery fans of things. Like I really like discovering all the hidden mechanics and of part of the games, which I think would be kind of ruined if the game outright told you how stuff like dodge offset or on landing
Mhm,
UT in Ninja Gaiden, for example, works. I think it actually one part of it is that I think the community aspect is really important, and
oh, yeah, no, communities
the
are always important.
this
It's
hidden mechanics like actually foster to me like challenge and hidden mechanics really foster a community. It might be
mhm,
how I started with really kind of getting an action game with Monster Hunter, like Monster Hunter Freedom on back on the PSP,
mhm.
and it was a game I started playing like pretty randomly, and I got my ass kicked. Completely got ass kicked by the first like big monster that destroyed me. And so
You know,
I
Monster Hunter is notorious for being a pretty difficult game.
oh
Like, the only Monster Hunter game that I played was, 4 Ultimate,
mm-hmm.
and I remember I struggled the first time with that, but luckily I had friends that were obsessed with the game that they were able to lead me around and explain what I can and can't do, and, you know, spending time playing that game with other
Yeah,
friends is what
that's the thing. It
really
has
helps with getting better.
a really steep learning curve, and it also has a lot of things that the game doesn't tell you. Like a lot
Mhm,
of the stuff regarding weapon choices and all the stats that the weapon have, all the damage formula, or how the hitbox work on the enemy, or how actually the damage calculation works, or the elemental damage. That is all stuff
mhm,
that it's not really explained, especially in the West. Like in Japan, they had a lot of like guidebooks and stuff like that that came out in magazines like Famitsu or specialized stuff for Monster Hunter that explain all of these intricacies. But I think like the why I say that to me discovering these mechanics is a big part of the game is that
it
because
definitely
that's what I did pretty much with Monster Hunter Freedom. Like I got my ass kicked, and I dropped the game for a bit, and then started looking online and found this amazing Italian community actually, which is pretty rare for games, especially for niche one like Monster Hunter. It was this forum called Monster Hunter for Fun, and that's where I really started like getting into communities and understanding how communities can really help a game and
mhm,
really help the experience. And what I really loved about Monster Hunter was all those hidden mechanics, or figuring out throughout with the community all this stuff, uh, all how damage work, how stagger limit on the monster work, and all that stuff. And I think that
mhm.
if the game outright told me how that stuff worked, it would have lost some
Yeah,
appeal for
it
me.
definitely would have lost its luster
Mm-hmm.
if the game just sort of flat out told you, "Hey, you could do that." The magic is gone. So yeah, discovery is also important because I think that also adds a bit of longevity to a game. When you start to discover new things, it just makes you want to continue discovering more of
Mm,
what the game
yeah, absolutely.
could be hiding, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's actually part of the reason why I love Wonderful 101 so much
Mm-hmm.
because even to this day, I'm still discovering all these little things that the game has thrown in there. I mean, that is a game that is just crammed full of little things that they're not necessarily useful for getting better with, but they're things that are just thrown in there because, Kamiya is crazy enough to throw it in there to see if anyone will find it. And that's what just makes the game special to me because I'm always finding these little things. And whenever I talk about it on my Discord group, I'm like, oh, no way. That's pretty cool. I didn't realize you could do that.
Yeah,
Like,
that's one of the most amazing things with action games, especially because they have such depth of mechanics.
yeah.
So, you always pretty much you always play for style when you play. Like you really are into style games.
Yeah, because of the influence of the CGG, I
Mm-hmm.
usually focus on enjoying a game for the style, but it's not always just the style. I also try to find a game that has a satisfying mechanic. I don't necessarily want a super deep game. I just want a game that feels satisfying when I pull off the right moves and whatnot. So it's not just
And what do you look for? Like, are you more interested in in the player kits and all the moves you can do and how they interact with each other, or about the enemy design or challenge? What are you looking for in a game?
it I feel
In a
like
style
it's a
game
mix.
specifically.
No, of course, I gotcha. I feel like it's a mix of both, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I think it has a lot to do with the characters themselves. If the character has a lot of cool tools that allows you to manipulate enemies in different ways, that's the kind of game that I would gravitate more towards, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's why, as much as I like this game, I couldn't really get into Astral Chain because I felt very limited with that game. I'm sure it's not a limiting game. I know there are people out there that have
Oh no,
shown
no,
off
but
some
it's definitely
amazing combo
more
videos.
efficiency based than style based.
But for me, like, Astral Chain felt limiting because there are so many things that it lacked. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't a regular jump button, that sort of thing. So there were no traditional ways of jumping, that sort of thing. So that kind of stuff sort of felt like a turnoff. But I still enjoy Astral Chain for what it is. If anything, I think Astral Chain is a game designed more to be about being proficient.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely more about being efficient and being proficient with the mechanics, especially
Yeah,
with all the items you can use
and
and
I'm
all the
absolutely
grenades
not
to
a
actually crowd control enemies and all that stuff.
I'm not against that at all. If
Mm-hmm.
anything, like, ever since my interaction with the community, like the crazy action games community, I've learned that it's not always just about style play, but also just proficiency and stuff.
Yeah, of
That's
course, of
why
course.
I've opened up to learning to play other games like Ninja Gaiden Black, which
Mm-hmm.
is a game that I learned early on. It's not a game that you could just easily style in, no matter how much
Oh
I
no,
tried.
you
No, but no, it's a
came to
game
a
that's
point,
more
but
about
you really need to really understand the game to start to style on it.
absolutely. That is a game that does require much more proficiency before you can get anywhere with style play. So that was kind of my little regret when it came to streaming Ninja Gaiden Black
Mm-hmm.
the last time I did it. But ever since that stream, I've learned not every game should be like that. It's more about just being proficient and paying attention to enemy behavior and not just simply about trying to do all these cool moves because they look cool. It's more about just
Mm-hmm.
finding what's effective at the right moment. You essentially have to be a real ninja when playing
Yeah, pretty
Ninja
much.
Gaiden.
So, and what I'm curious about something like I'm more on the efficiency side of things. Like I'm like games more like Ninja Gaiden, Monster Hunter, and stuff like that. More based on like efficient play more than styling on the enemies. But one thing I actually enjoy, I actually what got me back in action game was learning Devil May Cry 4 and
Mhm.
starting to learn how to actually style or start to style. I'm actually pretty bad at that game, but in general, how to approach a game from like a stylish standpoint instead of just killing the enemy as fast as I can, pretty much.
Mhm.
But one thing I don't really enjoy, especially with DMC after 3, or with most style games in general, is that they don't really they put too much emphasis on the player's kit, so the moves and all that,
Mhm.
but they don't put enough thought on, in my opinion, on enemy design. Like especially with the Devil May Cry 5.
Oh, yeah,
In
yeah, no,
Devil May Cry
absolutely.
5, pretty
That
much.
is something that I
Mm-hmm,
noticed, recently when I was, doing that stream, when I was testing out the legendary Dark Knight mod that Hitchhiker made,
mm-hmm,
and I started noticing that it's kinda easy to just powerhouse through the enemies because they don't usually put up a fight. I mean, yeah, every once in
mm-hmm.
a while, they'll sneak up on you and get you with a hit, but for the most part, most of the tools that Dante has allows him to just powerhouse through the enemies,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sometimes
Once
he
you
even
get
gains
them in
super
the air,
armor.
you're pretty much untouchable.
Yeah, you become untouchable in the air, and in Devil May Cry 5, it's so easy to do air combos. There's very little room to mess up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you mess up, it's mostly on you and not just because, like, there's, like, a strict timing window for jump canceling the way there is on in Devil May Cry 4. But, yeah, most of the enemies in Devil May Cry 5 are just they're just mindless, body pillows, I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like,
So it doesn't feel engaging. So I know where you're getting at. It doesn't feel engaging when you're fighting against these enemies because
mm-hmm.
there's more emphasis on being stylish rather than paying attention to enemy behavior.
Exactly, especially with the style system in 4 and 5. Like, I think the style system would be even more amazing if actually the enemy were really really aggressive. Like I'm talking like Ninja Gaiden 2 aggressive, because you actually would need to use all the styles and do stuff, cool stuff like doing an air combo on an enemy,
Yeah.
and then see like a frost shooting a projectile at you and change to royal guard through it and continue the combo if you are good
Uh-huh.
enough to continue the combo with on the enemy. That would be
Right.
really really interesting,
This
and I
is
think it's something
actually oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Bayonetta actually does better than most on this part. I think like
Oh, yeah, no,
enemies
like,
are
I
actually.
actually
Yeah, yeah, go
I
ahead.
wanted to bring that up
Mm-hmm.
because even though in Bayonetta, it's really easy to do air combos on certain enemies, there are enemies that are introduced in Bayonetta that requires you to be proficient. You can't style on these enemies like Grace and Glory and the Joys. You can't style on them. You can't do air combos on them. You're forced to dance with them. You have to be paying attention to their telegraphing. You need to be paying attention to their claws. You need to be paying attention to how they behave. I think Grace and Glory is
Yeah,
a
Grace and Glory is
very
the
well
prime
designed
example.
enemy because it's not just about styling, it's
Mm-hmm.
about paying attention to the enemy.
Yeah,
And it
it's the
works with
styling with the
Bayonetta.
enemy. That's the thing. That's what
Yeah,
I look for in a more stylish game. Like
that's
styling with
actually
the
like
enemy and engaging with what the enemy does and changing my
yes.
approach depending on what the enemy does.
Yes, yes, yes. So, yeah, absolutely. When it comes to that, I agree that proficient play in this sense does work better because you're not just simply fighting against mindless enemies. You're paying attention to how the enemy is reacting to you, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to react according to them. And the battle, your play style will change because of how the enemies approach you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
That's actually why I love Wonderful 101. I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent here,
no,
but
no, go
I
ahead.
definitely think I
Please go
definitely
ahead.
think Wonderful 101 blends both proficient and stylish play
Mm-hmm.
because in Wonderful 101, you don't just instantly get to launch these enemies into the air in order to do air combos. It doesn't work that way. You have to subdue the enemy first. And there are a number of ways to do that. Like for example, like if you're fighting against a giant robot that goes by the name of the Daigo do I think. I'm sorry. It's so funny how I love Wonderful 101, but I always forget these enemies' names. So forgive me.
Yeah, don't
But
worry.
when you fight the common giant robot, you can fight against them by just mashing out your attack. But because they have super armor, they can powerhouse through you. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
be extremely careful with that. But if you want to style on them, you don't just immediately get to do air combos on these enemies. You have to subdue them. And the way you could you have to do that is by using team attack. Like you have to be running around the enemy, dodging their attacks while attacking them with your team, not with the weapon, but with your actual physical team.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, little by little, your heroes start to attach to the bad guys. And the more heroes you attach to the bad guy, the higher the chances are that they'll get stunned. Once they're stunned, you are given a brief window where you can actually air combo them. And then once you them into the air, then you are free to style on them. But if you
Mm-hmm.
mess up and you drop them to the floor, there's a period where you can't stun them anymore.
Oh,
So
okay.
you're
That's
forced to
interesting.
fight them on the ground. So there's this balancing act where you have to be proficient in Wonderful 101 before you're rewarded with air combos. And that's why I think Wonderful 101 works extremely well because you could do proficient play with Wonderful 101. You don't necessarily need to do style play. I don't even think Wonderful 101 was designed to be played stylishly,
Yeah, I think
but
it's
there's
more like
room.
it's more DMC one than DMC three. Like you see a
Yes,
lot of
yes,
the enemy from
exactly.
DMC one, especially with the enemy design. And now,
Like proficient play in Wonderful 101
mm-hmm,
is more about understanding what weapons to use at the right moment. Like you
mm-hmm,
use fist to damage the enemy as fast as you can. You use sword if you want to fight them from a distance, but you still want to be up close. You use gun if you need to be at a far distance and you want to stay safe. You use hammer if you want to go through an enemy's armor because it's the only weapon that can survive an armor hit without breaking. So there's so many options. It's like a giant game of rock paper scissors where you have to
mm-hmm.
determine what the enemy is in but so you could decide what weapon to use on them. But again, if you figure out how to stun the enemy quick enough, you're free to style on them and that's your reward. Being able to style on them is the reward. So yeah, enemies in Wonderful 101, they're not just mindless body pillows.
Okay,
So
that's actually a really interesting mechanics. It's one of Wonderful 101. It was one of these game I always was interested in playing. The thing that stops me is that I don't really. First of all, I'm not really a big fan of Platinum games in general. Like I enjoy Bayonetta, and
mhm.
I played part of one Vanquish. I still need to really go in depth with that game, but I'm not generally a big fan of Platinum games. But the thing is, got me interested, especially because I saw like from analysis or your gameplays from you or from other big players on YouTube, and especially with the analysis that Matthew Matosis did
Mhm.
for One for One. I saw a lot of like DMC one DNA in it. A lot of like a real focus, like you said, on enemies that actually are aggressive, and you need to really understand how to play against them. The thing
Yeah.
that stops me is the all the genre shift and all the set pieces and mini games
Yeah.
and quick
That's
time events
that's
and all that stuff, because it's something that usually gets on my nerve pretty easily. Even with
oh no,
Bayonetta, even with Bayonetta,
I
like most
know.
of the bosses and the QT I don't really like, because
Mhm.
they're pretty much, even the boss, like the first boss, the first dragon boss. It's one
It's
of
like
the it's a set piece. It's a big set piece and nothing else. Like it's
I know.
the weak point in
I
some games.
understand where you come from.
Mm-hmm.
That's like one of the biggest caveat when it comes to platinum games, and mostly when Kamiya is the one directing a game. Kamiya, for whatever reason, he always has to inject these mini games into these
Yeah,
action games
that's
because
his love for arcade
that's
games.
his yeah, that's his love letter. And not that there's anything wrong with them. I honestly don't think the mini games are bad per se,
Mm-hmm.
but I will say that the genre shift sort of feels a little unnecessary because while they're fun to play the first time you experience them, when you start to go back and learn about the in-depth mechanic only to be thrown into this different gameplay, do you start to realize that yeah, these mini games are a bit of a nuisance. So I do agree with you on that aspect. Like the mini games are stuff I really think Platinum Games should really need to tone down on, especially with Wonderful 101. Now, like I'm crazy. Like
Mm-hmm.
I know for a fact that I'm crazy when I say that I'm actually one of the few people that don't get turned off when I play the mini game.
Mm-hmm.
That's mostly because most of the mini games that Wonderful 101 offers are games that they're based off of games that I personally love. Like, for example, like when I was growing up on the NES, one of the other games that I absolutely loved was Punch Out. Like, I remember
Okay.
playing that with my cousins and I was obsessed with Punch Out. And so when I was playing Wonderful 101 for the very first time and I got to the boss battle that had that Punch Out segment, my mind was going nuts. I was like, whoa, there's Punch Out here. This game is amazing. Maybe it's because I'm easily entertained, but honestly, I think the mini games in Wonderful 101 are great,
Mm-hmm.
but I do agree that there's too much of them. If there was a way for us to tone that stuff down and just focus on the gameplay alone, I definitely think Wonderful 101 would benefit more from that because Wonderful 101's gameplay, when you're playing the actual combat itself, that's where it shines. But when you jump into a different mini game, it can be a major turnoff. I understand why people aren't too eager to jump into it. I'm not going to fault them for that. But I will say that at the very least, you owe it to yourself to try out Wonderful
Yeah, I
101 for
really
its
should.
gameplay mechanics. If the mini games are still a turnoff, I totally understand. There isn't
No, yeah,
much I can really say
yeah. No, I
when
really
it comes
should.
to
Like
that.
there
So,
are a lot of ideas I really like on the one for one. The camera, especially the fact that you don't need to control the camera, and has this
yeah,
like really
that's
cool
very
camera, like
important.
similar to stuff like God of War One, the original
Yeah,
God of
like
War trilogy in general.
it's actually funny that you bring that up because just
Mm-hmm.
recently, there's this guy that I follow on YouTube. He goes by the name of Under the Mayo, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He did an analysis talking about like why the camera in Devil May Cry 5 doesn't work, and he brings up a good point.
Mm-hmm.
In action games, whenever you have full control of a camera, that can actually be a disadvantage for you because whenever you're in an area where you're surrounded by enemies and you have to control the camera, there's moments where an enemy can attack you from off screen and you're forced to have to move the camera before you could do anything, which
Mm-hmm.
can affect how you play. But when you have a game where the camera is able to control itself and give you a fixed point of view, you don't have to worry about fighting the camera because you'll get a clear view of all the enemies on screen. And that works with Wonderful 101 in many ways because Wonderful 101 gives you a fairly good camera view of the enemies. I'm not going to say it's good because even Wonderful 101 has a strange issue where for some
Yeah,
reason
there is
the
not such
camera,
thing as a perfect camera system,
yeah,
pretty
like
much.
the camera likes to zoom in a lot in
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful 101 when it should be the other way around. It should zoom out. But also, I think the fixed camera is important for a game like Wonderful 101 because you want to make sure that the camera does not skew whatever it is you're trying to draw. You need a clear view of the shape you're drawing.
Mm-hmm.
So the isometric view that Wonderful 101 goes for is kind of like a balance between trying to show you where the enemies are while also making sure you get a nice flat view so that you can draw. So yeah,
Yeah,
for Wonderful 101, it has that advantage, but it's not perfect. It's funny because Matthew Matosas also did a he recently not recently, this is like a month ago. He made a mod for Wonderful 101 that allows you to keep the camera locked all the way back. And that is a very big quality of life
oh,
change
absolutely.
that I really think Platinum Games should implement. And I know little by little, I know Platinum Games are starting to update Wonderful 101.
Mm-hmm.
They just recently added a new update where now you can unlock certain unlockables early on, which sort of changes the way the game plays right from the very start. So I
Mm-hmm.
think being able to change it so that you can have the camera locked all the way back would definitely help. But since Platinum Games has yet to do anything like that, we have
Yeah, it's
to
also not the
resort to
best
using
with
the
like
mod.
options.
Yeah,
Like
like
it doesn't.
Platinum Games tends to
Does
be
I
very
don't does
stubborn
Wonderful
with
101 have
not giving players.
rebindable controls on PC at least?
No, there are no rebind. There's no way to rebind the controls. I was actually going
Okay.
to say Platinum Games tends to be very stubborn
No,
in
yeah.
just telling the players this is how you play. There's very little options for changing the controls around. Now, Wonderful 101 does allow you to change the control options like but they're preset, like preset A, preset B, preset C. You don't have full customization, which is sad because now that the game is on PC, I really think Wonderful 101 would benefit with full controls because I can imagine myself being able to play Wonderful 101 with keyboard and tablet. Like, imagine if
Oh,
you can
hey,
use a drawing tablet to
that would
draw the
actually be
shapes.
really interesting.
I
That would
actually thought they were going to do that, but unfortunately, tablet is not supported with Wonderful 101. And I really think they need to do that. But it's funny because I have seen a very small modding community for Wonderful 101 where somebody was actually able to make the Steam controller touchpad work with Wonderful 101, where all you need
Oh,
to
okay.
do is slide your finger on the pad and you draw your shapes this way. And that's really good. I really hope Platinum Games listens to the fans and throws in some more options for the
Yeah,
PC
that would
players.
be great. But
It,
knowing
we're
Platinum,
very close. We're very close. But yeah, knowing Platinum Games, they tend to be very stubborn and they're like, no, this is what you're going to use because this is how we like it. You're going to like it. Ugh, it's annoying. That's why I'm amazed that Nier Automata seems to be the one game that actually has full rebindable controls. I hope
oh yeah,
that
yeah, that's
Platinum
right.
Games pays attention to that stuff, and hopefully in the future we get more of that.
Yeah, yeah, they should like rebindable controls are actually really important in
Yeah,
action games specifically.
rebind is important for many, many reasons.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So actually, I'm curious, what does the new update unlocks for Wonderful 101? I know that you can unlock Bayonetta from the start, but what else?
Yeah, so it that's mostly what it is. Normally with Wonderful 101, in order to unlock these extra bonuses, you have to really go out of your way to unlock as many of the achievements as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you want to unlock certain characters, you have to unlock a group of bottle caps, which are the in-game achievements for Wonderful 101. You unlock a certain group, and that will allow you to unlock a
And
certain
what
character.
what are they
In
tied
the
to?
case of
Are they tied
huh?
to are they tied to challenges or something like that? Like finish the game in on hardest difficulty or stuff like that, or are they
Yeah,
more
yeah,
mundane
that's
stuff?
usually how it is.
Oh, okay.
Most of them are very challenging, like complete all the hidden missions, beat the game with a platinum rank, beat the difficulty with a platinum rank. It's basically just
Yeah,
do
that's really
everything kind
interesting.
of thing.
Okay.
So it is a challenge and it is very difficult. In fact, Bayonetta requires you to get all 100 achievements in Wonderful 101, and that is a very daunting
That's
task.
really good.
Very rarely are people able to do that. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there is an alternative way to unlocking these characters, which is the typical collect these currency and then go to this section and then input a secret code. The
Mm-hmm.
thing is, with Wonderful
That's a
101, the
pity
secret
though.
code isn't a very consistent thing because I never used the codes myself, but
Mm-hmm.
I heard from other people that apparently in the PC version of Wonderful 101, they ended up flipping the code upside down. So up is down and down is up, and that just left people confused. So I guess Platinum Games heard about that and they decided, you know what, we're just gonna make it easier for the people now. Now all you need to do is go to this menu and type the code. And so what Platinum Games is doing now is if you follow them on Twitter, every once in a while they'll throw out a code and all you have to do is go into the menu and type it out. So for
Mm-hmm.
Bayonetta, you type Umbran Gift. And for John, you type Angel Slayer. And when you unlock these characters, you don't just simply unlock this. They give you an abundance of bonuses. Like, I tried to stream this the other day, but unfortunately my network was crap. So I'll just go ahead and
Oh,
explain a little bit more detail here.
yeah, go ahead.
When you type in the code for Bayonetta, you don't just get Bayonetta. You also get a multi-unite ability. You get 2 custom blocks. You get 2 custom slots. You get a credit card, which is an item that you use to buy one free item from the store without having to spend any money.
Mm-hmm.
And you also get an array of items like items that allow you to heal, to stay invincible. They basically made it where now for people that are new to Wonderful 101, if you just want to powerhouse through the game, there you go. You have all these extra bonuses. This has no effect on the people that already unlocked everything, which is why it wasn't really a big deal to me because it's like I
Mm.
already have Bayonetta. I don't need the code.
But
But
what does Bayonetta do? Like, she give you more moves or stuff like that, or is just a cosmetic thing?
here's the ultimate irony. Bayonetta is actually one of the worst secret characters you can unlock it
Okay.
in Wonderful 101 because the way Bayonetta works is she's tied to the gun ability. So in Wonderful 101, when you draw a gun, actually when you use gun, you get access to 4 types of abilities. You shoot regularly with your gun, or you could do gun stinger where you do rapid firing gun shooting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You also have gun cyclone where you spin the gun while shooting everywhere. And you also have gun rising where you make the gun flip upwards and then you shoot a bullet straight up into the sky.
Okay.
Now, Bayonetta gets the gun, but she doesn't get any of those special abilities. Instead, what happens is when you have Bayonetta as a leader and you draw a gun, she has the gimmick where she can wield 4 guns at the same time. So instead of
Okay.
just shooting with 1 gun, you just shoot 4 guns at the same time. That sounds pretty cool, but since you can't do any of those other abilities, it kind of feels like Bayonetta's held back.
Yeah.
So she's just there as a little novelty joke. But there is one thing though, like in Wonderful 101, you also have the ability to do this move called Unite Big, where if you draw the letter B, whoever is in your leader turns into a giant, and they
Okay.
basically, yeah, they turn into a giant that's formed from all the heroes, and then they attack all the enemies on screen, depending on what weapon you're using. If you have Bayonetta as a leader, instead of turning into Wonder Green as a Unite Big form, you instead turn into Bayonetta herself in giant form, and then you can do her traditional punch, 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 kick combo. And this
Oh
combo
wow.
is
Okay.
basically it basically insta kills any enemy on screen. So that's about the one good thing Bayonetta has. Everything else, she's kind of limiting. It's kind of bad when regular gun does more than Bayonetta gun. But
Mm-hmm.
outside that Unite Big gimmick, yeah, it's kind of cool to have Bayonetta. Now, ironically, on the opposite side of the spectrum, John, which is another character from Bayonetta,
Mm-hmm.
she is more effective to have on your team because she uses a sword. And normally, when you play the game and you use a
Yeah, she
sword,
was always best girl, so.
yeah, she was always best girl. Everybody loves John. Like even Yoshesk thinks John is better, I think. So in Wonderful 101, when you use sword, you can attack these enemies by cutting them up and slicing them up and all that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as you're fighting these enemies, you're also building up a multiplier on your score, right? And if
Okay.
you manage to reach uh times 2.5 on the multiplier, you unlock an extra element for sword and fist. For sword, your sword becomes electrified. It starts to do electrical base attacks where it freezes
Oh,
the
that's
enemies
really
in place and
cool.
you shock them, right? It's a really cool element.
So
And
it's
that's
based
actually,
on score multipliers.
yes, yeah.
That's
So
really
that
cool.
it's actually a really cool incentive to keep your
Yeah,
score
yeah.
going because only by doing that you gain these extra elements. For John, she has a permanent electric sword no matter what.
Okay.
So that's her ultimate gimmick, and I think that's what makes John so much better because she has access to all the regular sword abilities. She's able to do sword rising, sword cyclone, sword stinger. It's just that she's permanently electrified. So damn, she's already miles ahead of Bayonetta in terms of effectiveness in Wonderful 101. So yeah, that's it's a cool
Mm-hmm.
thing. So with these codes, you get
You
access to
can
these
unlock
characters
them
right from the
immediately, pretty
start.
much.
Yeah, so
And
I'm
don't you
pretty
think it's a
sure
bit of a
Platinum Games
pity?
did
Like,
this because they wanted, people to realize that these characters exist. Because when I went on Twitter, people were like, "What? Bayonetta's in the game?" In fact, there's actually a misunderstanding where people thought that Platinum Games added these characters
okay.
in like
Oh,
they're new.
sure.
They're not. They've been in the game since the Wii U. It's just that now they've been made even easier to
Mm-hmm.
unlock.
Don't you think
Eh,
that's a pity though? Like that the game loses something if you can just like put a code and unlock everything.
It does kind of lose its luster, but
Mm-hmm.
I would argue and say that you're getting something that requires you to have some knowledge about Wonderful 101. So even if you have an overpowered ability, you still need to be good enough to use it. It's kind of like Virgil in Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition. Yeah, he's broken, but you still need to understand the game system before
Mm-hmm.
you can do anything effective with him.
Mm-hmm. I think it's one of the like the unlocks. It's one of those mechanics like that pretty much don't exist anymore because of DLC and all that stuff. I think it's a pity
Yeah, updates
because
and
the
DLC is kinda is kinda ruining the charm behind,
yeah, yeah,
like,
the
having
stuff.
people, like, work hard to unlock it. I mean, I
Yeah,
there are some
exactly
people
that.
online that they hate when I say, like, "Oh, man, you just gotta get good," and they're like, "No, man, I just wanna unlock Bayonetta the easy way. I don't wanna do all the achievements." So it's like, well, with this update, now it's like, well, you don't have to complain anymore. Just put in the code, there you
Mm-hmm.
go. Bayonetta is yours, you don't need to be good. But I mean,
Yeah, it's a
again,
pity
it
though.
loses
Like
its luster.
it's something that I really like about like old games. That you have these like unlockables that are tied to challenges or stuff
Yeah.
like oh in a an arcade game like W101 and you unlock this cool costume for the character, or in an action game like Beat Dante Must Die and you get this cool costume for Dante, or this cool costume for Virgil, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool. Yeah, actually, even especially now with the internet and all, it's a really cool way to engage with the community in
Hmm.
a sort of like, it's a sort of bragging rights, but it's really cool to have this like badge of honor, quote unquote badge of
Yeah.
honor, that, oh, okay, I have this costume, so this means that I don't know, beat the game on Dante Must Die with all S ranks, stuff like that. And I think
Yeah.
that if you can just put a code, it loses a bit of the, I don't know, the luster that unlockable
Yeah.
has.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's so difficult because like this is the part where it's like really difficult for me to really talk about that
Mm-hmm.
because I've had people complain to me on stream or in the chat where they'll tell me, "You're just being an elitist dude. Let the people enjoy these things the way they want to." And, you know,
To a point, like,
to a point, like, I understand if you don't got time and you just
the
wanna
thing
have this
is, if you
available
don't,
right up front, that's fine.
and I kind of disagree with that. Like, if it is something
Mm,
that requires um some sort of like investment, either of time or
right,
skill,
right,
like it is something that, yeah, it changes stuff, but it's not really necessary to beat the
right.
game or to finish the game. So it one of these things, like, if you want to do it, do it, or if you don't want to do it and you don't want to put the time, or you don't want to learn how to play, just get over it. Like, don't, you
Right,
will not
yeah.
get it, that's it.
Man, it's an ongoing debate, believe me, because
No,
it's like
I'm
this
more of
even in
the
in
old
in the
school make
fighting game
goods
community,
kind of
you know?
stuff.
Yeah. There's not much I can really say
Mm-hmm.
about that without me, like, saying because for me, I'm the kind of player that enjoys being rewarded all the cool stuff,
Yeah.
by actually being able to accomplish the
Mm-hmm.
challenge. That's my experience. That's what I love most.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Okay.
It really should boil down to the player's choice, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, because it's been made too easy to get all these things, it again, it's like we said, it loses its luster.
Mm-hmm.
So it's such a blurred line, man.
Okay. Yeah, I'm more like, I'm all like stoic, old school, cynic kind of guy with this stuff. Like, I'm more
Yeah.
like, either get good or stop complaining.
Right.
So what else? Oh, I'm curious about something with your videos. So
Sure.
you pretty much do combo math
Yep.
with stuff. So how do you approach making a combo math? Like, do you get an idea for a specific combo and you start to like have a plan and plan out every combo in the video? You do cool, you do, maybe you do just a cool stuff on when you're playing on your own. Oh, okay, this I can put on the combo mat, or maybe it's the music choice and you hear a music and get inspired to do something specific. How do you start doing
So,
a
all
combo?
right. So it's so hard to really say because every video that I've made
Mm-hmm.
has had some sort of different history behind it. But for the most part, what happens is the way I approach a combo mat is like the first thing I think of is what can I do to make this entertaining? Because that's
Okay.
the most important thing for me. Like, I want to make sure that when I make a video, it's a video that can captivate the people. It's not just simply about me trying to show off or anything, although
Mm-hmm.
that's usually what makes a video fun. But I also think there needs to be some sort of excitement, some hype behind the video, right? So
Okay.
when I approach it, the first thing I try to do is I try to pick out a good song because if you pick a bad song, then you're just gonna, like you're just gonna turn off some people. It's like, "What? You picked that song of all things?" It's like, "Why would you do that?" I don't like it. I'm gonna turn off the the video. So I try to find a song that sort of feels like it's got a lot of momentum, a lot of energy to it. And then when I listen to the song, I start to picture in my head, okay, with this song, how can I present my video? Let me see. Maybe if I do like this, like that. I sort of think about it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I have a solid idea of how I want to pull it off, I go to the game and then I start recording my playthroughs. I first I try to do planned combos where it's like, okay, this is how I had it planned out. Let's see how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I have that planned combo recorded, I put it through the video to see how it looks and if it matches up. If it doesn't match up, then I start to wing it a little bit where I sort of do the same combo, but I throw in a little extra thing here and there. Like maybe I add a little pause here, or maybe I add a little dodge here, or something to sort of delay or quick or speed up the video to help make it match up with the music.
Okay, so
So
it's
that's
really
sort of the
for you. It's
mindset
really
here.
important to match the rhythm of the music.
Yeah, so it does boil down to matching up with the music, but a lot of the times that's never gonna work
Yeah, of course.
because, ultimately, the game itself, there's only so much you could do with the game before you realize it's not gonna match up.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, I sort of organize the video where it's like, okay, let's make it match with the song. And then while we're in the middle of the whole thing, that's when I start to really stray away from it and then start throwing in some extra things that's more skill based. So it's like a balance between making it dance with the music and
Mm-hmm.
then going into its own world and then matching back up with the music along the way. So it's like it's a really nice balance between the two of them where it's like I'm showing off my skills, but I'm also making the characters dance along with the music. That's
Yeah.
usually why in some of my videos, I end up throwing in 2 songs, where one song is more about just me showing off my skills, and then the second one is where I start to play in a much more goofier manner, where I just make the
Oh,
characters
okay.
move with the music.
Okay, so you're
Like, uh like in the last Wonderful 101 video that I did, where the first half of the video is a much more serious approach where I show off my high skills. And yeah, I do make it match with the music, but for the most part, it's just me showing off my
mm-hmm.
skills. And then in the later part, I throw in a song. I wouldn't consider the song wacky, but it is funky and it kind of has a wacky sense to it. So it's like, okay, now for this video, I'm just making the characters move along to the music. And this is where I just goof around and show off some of the more funnier side of improv.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part is all planned combos, and then the second part is just freestyle stuff that I do when I'm just like trying to come up with something and things that are not planned ahead of time. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna throw out these things and see if it works. And if it does, I keep it. If it doesn't, I go back and I sort of shape the same thing that I did, but then I start to focus on improving what I did through the improv.
Mm-hmm. So you have a balance between like showing off mechanics and showing off skills,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
just
Yeah,
like
it's a big balance, but overall, it's more
the
about just trying to
creativity
make
drive, like
videos.
expressing yourself with the music and
Yes.
with the movement of the game.
Yeah, I do
Because
my best to just
yeah, it does show
overall
up. It
make it
does show up in
entertaining.
a lot of your videos. Like one of my favorite video of yours is the Wicked Beats one.
Oh my god,
I
that one
think
is so
that's
much
really
fun. That
really
was a lot of
shows.
fun to do because it's funny because like that was a video that I made at the very last minute.
Mm-hmm.
Because originally I was gonna like sit away from I was gonna sit out from the style tournament that Danny was hosting at the time.
Uh huh.
But then at the last second, I was like, you know what? Nah. Let me whip up something quickly. And so I had only 2 days to record something, and so I decided, you know what? Let me just record all, like, my best skills with Bayonetta up to this point because, like, I was, at the time, playing Bayonetta, and when I was looking at my old combo videos, I was like, "I've gotten better, so let me just record the new stuff that I do and
Mm-hmm.
see if it works," and by sheer luck, it did. It worked because the
Yeah, it
music
did really
had
work.
the
So
same kinda energy that matched with the way that I played.
so it was
And
less
also,
planned
like,
out
if
and more freestyle.
yeah, it's, like, the Wicked Beats was more freestyle than it was
Mm-hmm.
planned out. It was just
Okay.
a very last minute thing, and I just got lucky with how it all matched up
Yeah,
perfectly.
it actually does match up pretty good, pretty well with the music.
Yeah, it does. Um, it's funny because like, if you go back and you pay attention to the video, since the song is made by, Hideki Naganuma, the
Yeah.
man behind the Jet Set Radio soundtrack,
Mm-hmm.
one of the little funny things that I did was in the intro, you see, Bayonetta skating on her ice blades.
Yeah.
I did that as a little tribute to Jet Set Radio.
Oh,
So if you
okay.
go back and you look at that, you'll
That's
realize,
really
oh yeah,
dope.
it is
That's
a
really
little
dope.
Jet Set Radio reference. And then, after the introduction, we go right to the combo, and the song just has so much hype.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, that song is perfect for making compilation videos. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a
probably
guy
is. That's a really
online
good
that goes
like.
by the name of Lithero, or I don't
Oh,
know if I'm pronouncing his name right. He does these Dragon Ball Fighter combo videos, and he
oh,
did one using that song. And when you watch that video, it's like, oh man, don't call them Gokus because this is so much fun.
yeah, it's a really great song. Yeah, it's a really cool beat.
It's just hype inducing, man.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can never go
absolutely.
wrong with Hideki Naganuma.
So you mentioned Punch Out and stuff like that. So I'm curious, are you into like the more arcade games, stuff like
Oh,
shmups or beat 'em
absolutely.
ups?
I am a sucker for arcade games, man, like you wouldn't believe. When I was a little kid
Mm-hmm.
and we were living in South Florida, there was a mall near where I used to live, that had an arcade center that went by the name of Funorama.
Oh, so you
And
actually went to an arcade? That's really
yeah,
cool.
I used to go to the arcades as a
Mm-hmm.
kid. Like when I would go to the arcades, I would play games like the Ninja Turtles beat 'em up, the Simpsons beat 'em up
Oh wow, the
game.
Ninja Turtle one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like those beat 'em up games, I was obsessed with those games, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like I honestly think those beat 'em up games also did influence a little bit in me wanting to enjoy action games.
Mm-hmm.
Although I can't be quite certain about that because, like I said, when I was playing Bayonetta, I was such a scrub lord. I don't know. But somehow, I was just obsessed with those beat 'em up games. Like the Ninja Turtles one and all, those games were always so much fun. I enjoyed games like Metal Slug. And as I started getting older and older, and we started having like a new technology with our arcade games where we started having 3D games, it was when I started becoming obsessed with Crazy Taxi.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
I don't get the chance to say this often, so I'll just say it right
Go
now. If
ahead.
there's one game that I like more than Bayonetta and Wonderful 101, believe it or not, it's Crazy Taxi. Crazy Taxi is my definitive arcade game. I never get bored of Crazy Taxi at
Okay.
all. And that is definitely a game that feels so rewarding to play when you start to learn the in-depth mechanics that it has.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to spend days learning how to do all these crazy maneuvers, like the crazy boost and the crazy dash. Man, that game is so much fun. Like it's gotten to a point now that I'm actually trying. Like I've been practicing like for a while. I want to try to get the high score in Crazy Taxi because I want to get my name in the record books. I've gotten pretty
Oh,
close.
that would be really cool.
I actually attended one of the arcade centers where they had what was that? Oh my god, well, there's a website that um keeps track of all the high scores for the Guinness World Records. I forgot what it was called. It
Uh,
escapes me right now. It was
uh,
Twin Arcades or
Twin
something. I
Galaxies? Twin Galaxies, I think it is.
Twin Galaxy? No, I don't think it's Twin Galaxy. It escapes me. Like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
pretty sure
I know what
whoever's
you're
listening to
talking
this
about. Yeah, I
video,
know what you're
yeah.
talking
Okay,
about, but I can't
so
remember the name.
okay, so when I went to this arcade center, they had the people from that website representing the place, and they were
Mm-hmm.
asking, "Hey, like we have these arcade games, and we want to see if you guys can go for the high score." And they had Crazy Taxi there, and
Oh, wow.
I signed up for it, and oh my god, it was heartbreaking because I was just $10,000 away from actually making it to first place. I ended up landing at third place, so at the very least, I can say that I
Well,
was
third
the
place is still
third
good though.
highest record holder for Crazy Taxi. If you go online and find that name, well, actually no, because my name is represented. My real name is represented as a high score, so I'm not about to share my real name here just yet. But I mean, if you do some sleuthing around, maybe you'll find
Yeah,
it.
well, I'll see. I'll see if I can find something.
But yeah, like, oh, Crazy Taxi, I never get enough of that. Like, actually, one day, what I want to do is like hook up my Dreamcast to my computer and maybe do a live stream where I
Oh
attempt
yeah,
a high
that would
score.
be really really cool to see.
So yeah, I'm
Especially if you
a,
wanna go
I,
for world record, that would be really cool to see all the
yeah.
intricacy of the scoring system also stuff.
Right. So yeah, like I am an arcade kid at heart, like
Mm-hmm.
Marvel versus Capcom, Power Stone, House of the Dead, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighters. Man, those are games I loved playing in the arcade
Mm-hmm.
center. Unfortunately, there came a point where the arcade center shut down and
Yeah.
it's gone. But the good news is recently, I think a year ago, there is a new arcade place that opened up about a half an hour away from where I live
Oh,
called Arcade
I envy
Odyssey.
you. You don't know how much I envy you.
I know, like, I'm lucky as hell that such a place exists, and I go there every once in a while. I drive there, like, it's a half an hour drive, and I go there, and
Hmm.
sure enough, they have the Crazy Taxi arcade machines. I'll just sit down and just have a blissful evening just goofing around with Crazy Taxi. And not only that, but these people have also been able to acquire some rare arcade cabinets. Like, it's one of the few places where they have Ninja Baseball Batman.
Oh wow.
Uh
Okay.
yeah, they actually have it, and they have the Sega Sonic the Hedgehog arcade board, you know, that trackball
Oh
arcade game.
yeah,
They
sure,
have
sure.
it there. It's like, oh my god, like
That's really
I haven't been
fucking
to that
cool.
arcade place in forever. Just me bringing this up, I'm like, you know what? This weekend I'm gonna go to that arcade center again.
That's really cool. No, yeah,
Oh,
the
it's
arcade stuff
amazing.
is always fascinated me. I never really lived it because here in Italy we didn't really. When I was young, we didn't really have any arcades. Arcade were really rare, even in the A days, and
Yeah,
they
no,
started to die out. And so I didn't really. The only um actually experience with arcade cabinets was when I went to either when I went to the beach towards these like arcades on the side
mhm.
in bars and stuff like that, and they had stuff like Metal Slug or
Ah.
Dark Stalkers. Actually remember really liking Dark
Ooh.
Stalkers um, as a kid, and so I never really experienced like the real arcade culture, and it's really strange because I read a lot of about it. So I'm actually kind of nostalgic for something that I never really lived. It's really
Oh, no, no,
strange.
I know how that feels, like, I mean, the arcade world is a whole different world that just sounds amazing for
Hmm.
any gamers to experience, and it's so sad that now it's such a rarity,
Yeah, man.
um, because, like, here in South Florida, like, back in the early days, like, in the middle of the '90s and in the early 2000s, we did have several arcade centers,
Hmm.
like, we used to have a place called GameWorks, that I would frequently go to, and it was a wonderful place to go to. It had arcade games like I'm trying to remember, like aside from the ones I had already mentioned, they also had this amazing arcade game that was a gigantic screen. It's a very gigantic vertical screen that
Hmm.
was two floor high, like 2 floors high,
Oh
and you
Jesus.
sit down in a chair. And when you shoot these enemies, your chair actually goes up and down. It's
Oh,
like a
that's really cool.
ride. It's like a ride in Universal
Yeah, yeah.
Studios. It's so neat. Unfortunately, that arcade center has shut down. It's gone now. So I
Yeah,
miss riding that ride.
yeah, it's a real pity. They're pretty much dying out pretty much everywhere. Even
Yeah,
in Japan, they're starting to really
yeah.
die out.
I heard
Yeah,
about
Sega.
Sega shutting down one of their
Yeah,
arcade centers.
that was fucking heartbreaking, man.
It is heartbreaking. I would do anything for these arcade games to live. That's why I'm lucky that we have that one arcade center. It's a the arcade center that I mentioned, Arcade Odyssey.
Hmm.
It's essentially a mom and pop place that's being run by a couple of passionate gamers, and
Okay.
I'm just surprised that they're able to keep the fundings going.
Yeah.
They also have a section there for LAN parties. Like you can go there to
No. Okay.
play computer games as well. Like that's where people go to have their Halo tournaments.
Hmm.
They also have pinballs in the back. Like, oh my god,
No.
the pinball machines are
Pinballs
awesome.
are amazing.
Yeah. So like, I mean, not to rub it in your face, but
Hmm.
it's like it's such an incredible experience. If you
Yeah,
ever
I
get
can
the chance
imagine.
to like find an arcade center,
I don't think
just
I don't
spend the
think
whole day.
anything exists like in
Nothing
Italy.
around your area?
Pretty much.
Yeah,
No, in
man.
Italy
I
in
know the
general,
feeling too,
I
because
don't think.
before the Arcade Odyssey, there was nothing, man. All the
Yeah.
arcades were gone.
No, and I heard all of these stories. Like recently, I heard a stories about a game called Tower of Druaga, which was this like kinda action RPG, really old arcade action RPG, and it
Mhm.
was really cryptic, like completely unfairly cryptic. And
Oh.
but the beauty of it was that it created really a really passionate community around it. And
Mhm.
so in Japan, this is in Japan, and I read that they had this like notebook filled with on the side of the arcade, like filled with all the notes of all the various players that like discovered or the various secrets and stuff. So it's stuff like, oh, if you go to floor 2 and stand still for like 5 minutes, you will get a fairy that you can use to do this and you can use to do that. And it's really a
Wow.
really cool thing that I would really like to experience something like this, that this like sense of community in actual person, like can actually do this kind of research in person in a place like the
Mhm.
arcades would be really really great. Like I said, I'm nostalgic for something that I really didn't experience. It's really
Mm.
strange.
I see.
What about you? Mentioned like Street Fighter and all that stuff. So are you into fighting games too?
Absolutely. But it was a very slow burn getting into
Mm-hmm.
fighting games. Like because when I was a kid, of course, I had no lick of sense of how fighting games worked.
Yeah, of course.
But
I
I
feel
just
with you.
remember I would go to the arcades and I would see these people playing Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Oh my god, that looks so cool." So, like, my dad would give me, like, a bag of quarters, and I would spend the day messing around with Street Fighter, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was just button mashing my way to victory. I had more fun playing Mortal Kombat, if anything. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
Mortal Kombat was a lot more fun for me. Like, when I was a little kid,
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah. Of course, like
you know,
with
like,
all the
you're not
gore.
supposed to be playing Mortal Kombat, but I always felt like a rebel playing it
Yeah,
because it's like, "Oh my god, I'm playing this one."
I actually played
But,
I
okay,
played Doom
so
when I was like 2, so I can't really speak about that.
alright, so here's the thing. So I only dabbled with fighting games as a kid in the arcades,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it wouldn't be until the Xbox 360 days. No, not even Xbox 360. Let me dial it back a little bit and go for the Dreamcast days. So during the Dreamcast, when I was enjoying all these games, I started becoming obsessed with games like Power Stone
Mm-hmm.
and Marvel vs. Capcom. Those were games that were just mind blowing to me. But the reason I liked them wasn't because the games were just fun. It was because at the time I just loved the idea of playing multiplayer games. The
Okay.
one thing I want to bring up is as a kid growing up, I always felt pretty lonely. I didn't have that much friends. I
Yeah,
was
I
like the
can I
one
can
kid who
relate
would
to
sit in a
that.
corner. But over the years, I would meet up with these people who would become my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
And when my friend bought an N64, he would buy multiplayer centered games, and so we would go to his house to play GoldenEye, and I was always obsessed with finding four-player games, like GoldenEye is such a fun play. So during the Dreamcast days, I would find games like Marvel vs. Capcom and Power Stone, especially Power Stone 2, because Power Stone 2 is so much fun to play as a four-player beat 'em up. My friends and I would get together, we would get a bunch of soda and pizza and just pig out and mess around with those games. It was so much fun.
Yeah, that was really
But
cool.
I was never really into the fighting games, like, I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
learning about the mechanics. Now, during the time of the Dreamcast, a friend of mine introduced me to a fighting game called Guilty Gear,
Oh wow.
and I remember playing Guilty Gear, and it was the first time I saw a fighting game that was mesmerizing to me. Like, I wasn't wanting to play it because of the multiplayer, I wanted to play it because this looked cool. Like Soul Bad Guy and Kai Kiske and
Mm-hmm.
Potemkin, they look so amazing. These are well drawn out characters, and you're playing as them. Like, I feel like I'm playing an animated game kinda.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah,
remember
exactly.
my friend and I would go toe to toe, but
Mm-hmm.
I was still a noob when it came to fighting games. I had no idea how to do inputs. I just button mash my way to victory. So, okay. So after the Dreamcast, then came the Xbox 360. I bought
Okay.
an Xbox 360, and one day when I was in GameStop, I saw that they announced a brand new fighting game called Blaze Blue. And when I saw the
Okay.
video for it, I was looking at it and I was going, "Whoa, wait a minute. This looks like this one game I played on the Dreamcast." And when I talked to the guy who was at the register, he was telling me, "Yeah, man, it's from the same people that did Guilty Gear. This is the very first brand new fighting game that they made." And it just so happened that I saw this announcement on the day it was released. So I was like, "You know what? let me buy this game and let me give it a test run. Because
Mm-hmm.
in the back of my mind, actually, no, like one of the things that I learned about Guilty Gear was that there was so many different versions, right? There was
Yeah, yeah.
Guilty Gear X2, Guilty Gear Midnight Carnival, and how there's always these kinds of updates. With Blaze Blue, I realized this is the first of its kind. So I was like, instead of like, this is my chance
To start
to jump
fresh.
into a brand new to start fresh with a fighting game.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so Blaze Blue became the very first fighting game where I was actually dedicated to learning about the intricacies of its mechanics. And it was tough because I was such a noob, but the best thing about Blaze Blue, like, I don't know if you know, but, like, when Blaze Blue came out on day 1, it actually came with a DVD that had instructions on how to play these characters, and I think that
Oh
DVD is
wow.
what really helped me understand more. Like, that's such a rarity. You don't see that often. You don't have games where you buy it and it comes with an instructional DVD alongside it.
Yeah, because
And
I can't think of another game that did that.
right.
Not
So
to that extent. Like I know like Super Mario Galaxy. I don't remember if one or two came up with an instructional DVD, but that was like really basic stuff for people that didn't know what a video game was, like how to move.
right.
You need to press the A button to jump, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So to that
Alright.
extent, actually explaining combos, like the thing that comes closer to that, I think, is the secret video in the unlockable videos in DMC3 that actually
Mm. That's
shows
right.
shows
Yeah,
you a lot of the
DMC3
style
did
of
have an
the.
unlockable video that
Mhm.
showed, "Hey, you could do more than just what you've played." Yeah, it's so cool when a game actually does offer something like that, you know?
Yeah, that's a really cool way to actually find the balance between discovering stuff yourself and explaining that to
Yeah.
you.
So, with Blaze Blue,
Mm-hmm.
I was having a tough time trying to figure out what kinda character I wanted to play as. Now, prior to Blaze Blue, another multiplayer game that my friends and I were playing was Super Smash Brothers.
Of course.
And in Super Smash Brothers, I would always play as Donkey Kong because Donkey Kong was my favorite Nintendo character because
Mm-hmm.
growing up, I
Good
also had a
taste.
Super
Good taste.
Nintendo and my dad got me as a gift Donkey Kong Country and that game is so mind-blowing. So when I was playing Smash Brothers, I was always Donkey Kong because I always thought he was cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was playing Blaze Blue, I was like, I wonder what kind of character would be the equivalent to playing as Donkey Kong. Yeah, it's such a weird mindset, but
What's the
that's
Donkey
how I
Kong?
did it. So what's a Donkey
Who's the
Kong,
big
right?
ape?
What's the big dude? And that was when I saw Tager
So
and
you're into
Iron Tager.
grapplers.
Such a yeah, like because of Donkey Kong,
Mm-hmm.
my playstyle for fighting games ended up being grapplers. Grapplers ended up being my playstyle. Like I love grapplers, and Tager, I think, is such a well-designed grappler because his whole gimmick is he's slow, he's big, so he has a tough time closing in on you,
Mm-hmm.
but he makes up for that with his magnetic abilities. So when you're fighting an enemy, you can use these gimmicky tricks to pull the enemy towards you, and this can lead to some very interesting combos if you're thinking outside the box. You can use
Mm-hmm.
the magnet to manipulate the enemies, and man, Tager ended up being that dude for me. Like, and between Tager and Donkey Kong, these were the characters that influenced me into enjoying grapplers. So after Blaze Blue, I started expanding on more fighting games. I started playing Street Fighter, like for real. Like I actually decided to learn the intricacies, and the characters that I was learning to play as included E Honda, Zangief, and Rufus.
Okay.
And it got to a point where I was so dedicated to Street Fighter and Blaze Blue that I actually started entering tournaments
Oh
in my
wow.
South Florida region. Um, I'll never say I was that good, but I will say that when it came to Blaze Blue, I was actually in the top tens.
Oh okay.
Um, Something that I mentioned in one of my streams a long time ago is like, I actually don't care if I lose in a fight. I actually prefer having a fight where I feel like I'm actually putting up a fight. If a fight is exciting, I prefer that to
Yeah,
just
that's
simply
pretty much the best
that was the
mindset
mindset
to
that
learn
was the
something.
mindset that I learned early on because I started watching a lot of YouTube videos and I was watching these videos about how to get good at fighting games, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember which video it was, but I know there was a video where a guy said, "Hey, you shouldn't worry about winning. What's more important is the excitement of the fight. If you're able to put up a fight and you lose to that fight, then you have a reason to go back and watch what you did and learn from it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
that's
always
the best
love
mindset to see if you
so
wanna
yeah,
learn something.
so that was a mindset that I always have. Of course, I do get salty when I lose,
Yeah,
but
of course.
I learned to just shrug it off and
Hmm.
have fun. And that's what led to playing these crazy spectacular games like Marvel vs. Capcom 3. That's a absolute spectator game to watch. It's ridiculous. Like
Hmm.
especially when Maximilian Dude recently did the Marvel vs. Capcom 3 tournament. Whoo boy, that's so much fun to watch.
Yeah, yeah.
But
No,
yeah, I'm primarily a grappler when it comes to fighting games.
okay, okay, okay. No, I never really got into, like, I really enjoy watching fighting games, and I really enjoy the culture surrounding it. But I never really got
On
into it. I think it's because I really don't know anyone that actually wants to play them
Yeah,
and actually plays
that's
them.
the one that's one of the big burdens behind fighting games. You need another person to play with so that you can improve yourself
Yeah.
because there's only so much you could do with computers, you know what I mean?
Also with being Italian, time zone and all that stuff,
Times oh my god.
finding
It's
people
bad for
to
me
play
because I live in
online.
South Florida and I don't know that many people like online that lives in the same area as I do. Whenever
Hmm.
I stream, it's usually the audience that I usually have are people that are awake at 5 in the morning. So it's like, oh boy.
Hmm.
So I know the feeling. I
Yeah,
know
yeah.
the feeling.
No, I actually with fighting games, I really remember playing Tekken 3 on the PS1, but really, really casually. Like I was a kid. I probably went to elementary school, so I was really, really young. And I remember really playing that game with friends from school, with my mom and all that, and really, really liking it. And then on the PS2, I don't remember the name anymore. Like it's Bloody Roar, Bloody Roar,
Oh, Bloody Roar.
Bloody Roar. I think it was Bloody Roar 3,
Mhm.
pretty sure. And I really remember. And then, but I actually always button mashed. Like I never really got into fighting games until the 3DS of all things.
Oh,
Like
okay.
I bought a 3DS and there was like Street Fighter 4 for my phone,
Oh.
and I said, okay, I really want to actually learn how to do the moves and all that. So then I started experimenting and I started to learn how to do Hadokens and all to do Shoryuken and all to do the combos and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And I actually that was pretty much the game I played the most, I think, because I started playing. I never really went to tournament because here in Italy we don't really have a scene. Like there are some, I think there are some, but they're really niche and they're usually only for the big games. So maybe Street Fighter 5, maybe Tekken 7, and that's it. Like you will probably never find something like Unist or Guilty Gear or all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And but the one thing I did, it was playing. It was really, really casual, but I really remember liking playing on a forum uh, that hosted a tournament, on online tournament. I really, really remember that. And yeah, it actually was my main. I started my main in Street Fighter was Sagat. I
Ah.
always had Sagat, which is really strange because you usually don't really like slow characters. I much prefer the fast, agile one. But
Mhm.
something really, like, I really like the moves. I really like the tiger knees and all the mechanics surrounding it. So all the spacing with the projectiles, and then using the tiger knee to approach, the tiger uppercut to anti-air, and all that things really, really
Yeah.
interested me. So yeah, it's something I really want to get into. Like I was thinking about getting into Unis.
I've been thinking about getting into that one too,
Mm-hmm.
like, because I had a friend I
Mm-hmm.
have a friend who is a big fighting game nutcase. If there's anyone that I trust when it comes to talking about fighting games, it's him. Like he's always obsessed with playing the latest fighting games. And he actually had me try out Unist one time.
Mm-hmm.
Like he brought his copy over and we spent the day playing and he was telling me, dude, if you love Blaze Blue, you're gonna love this game. And he had me try out characters like man, their names escape me, but I know there's this one big dude who's got these giant ass claws. He had
Oh
me
yeah,
try
yeah, I
out
know,
that
I know them.
character and all I remember was going, wow, this is a huge bliss. Like I can actually be creative with my combos. Because one of the most interesting things about Eunice that I remember experiencing was like in most fighting games, when you do combos, you always have to start with the lowest attack before you can go into the highest attacks. You can't really do combos where you do high attacks and then low attack.
Mm-hmm.
But Eunice actually makes it where you can do high attacks and then go into low. And when I mean high and low, I mean like the strong
Yeah,
hits
yeah,
and then
sure.
the weak hits. And Eunice, oddly enough, is one of the only games I can think of that does that. And because of that, it allows for more freedom with combo expressions. And damn, I actually really should jump into Eunice with like whenever I talk about this. But I just never got around to it because man, I already have a huge backlog of games that I gotta take care of.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Don't get me
oh
started on my
god.
backlog.
Yeah, I know.
Actually, one thing,
uh,
it's completely off topic, but it's my show. I do what the fuck I want.
of course.
Like, have you watched an anime called I Score Girl?
High School Girl. Oh my god. Yes. I saw that on Netflix. That is a show that I ended up falling in love with. It's
Yeah,
such a very wholesome
I
anime.
think
Like it's funny.
it's one of the only animes that talks about video game properly talks about video game.
Yeah, it
Like,
actually manages to properly showcase games like in a way where it's like you can tell that
mm-hmm,
the people who worked on this they did their homework when it came to studying the culture of these games. Like and it helped out a lot for me too because like I knew about that culture growing up.
mm-hmm,
Like, cause I was in the arcade scenery. I was with friends who grew up with a PlayStation, who grew up with a Sega Genesis and all that sort of thing. And when I was watching High Score Girl, like I did love how accurate they were able to portray a
mm-hmm.
lot of these games. Of course, it's a Japanese culture, so it's very different to the way
Yeah,
it
of
is
course.
here,
No, but
but it still felt relatable, you know?
yeah, the thing
Mm.
I love about it is like it actually talks about, it doesn't use video game just as a side things. It actually talks about video game. It talks
Yeah.
other than the culture. Actually talks about how video game can be used to create connection with people, and how important communities are, and how important like growing with a game, and like actually putting the time and effort to be good at it, and to see and fall in love with a game because you wanna compete, and you wanna um, become better and better, and all the interaction with with people that become your rival or your friends,
Mhm.
and all the stuff with the actually rival arcade communities and all stuff, and also all the onesie settings, which is something I really enjoy, the culture of once is seeing a game. So not
Mhm.
really getting into it. I think it's a lovely show, like a really cool show. It's one of the
It is a really lovely show. I mean, if you could get past like the
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 CGI.
very
Yeah.
yeah, the CGI is a little off-putting,
Mm-hmm.
but when you get past that, it's a really lovely show. It's funny because my little brother,
Mm-hmm.
he saw me watching it, and he's like, "Oh, you're only watching it because it's so ooey gooey and you want a girlfriend and blah blah blah." So it's to be honest, I kinda would love to have that kinda story where I actually do find a girl that loves games as much as I do,
Nah,
but that's a
I think
whole different story. I'm not about to jump into that.
I think
But
everyone
I
can
will
relate
say
to that.
that
You know?
but it's such a lovely anime, yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
anyone who's listening to us talking, if you haven't already seen High
Yeah,
Score
absolutely.
Girl,
Go
do
watch it.
watch
It's amazing. It's on Netflix. So go
it. Yep.
watch. Team Hidaka or
It
Timono.
I and also, like, I did read up on the manga for
Mm-hmm.
it, like, I only read the first 2 volumes.
Mm-hmm.
And the manga also goes into a lot more details, like, there's actually, some tidbits at the end of the book that explains more about the culture behind the game,
Yeah,
so
I
it's
think that
actually
it actually shows a
more
lot more
informational
games.
than the
It
anime
actually shows a
itself.
lot more games. It actually has a pretty interesting history because they got, I think, sued because they actually used the images and stuff from the games. So they
Yes,
and
they
they
were sued at one
they
point.
were sued at one point, and then they started. I don't know what happened, but they actually continued the manga, and then they started the anime. And the anime is actually, they work with Capcom and some other companies, so they actually
Mhm.
show a lot less games on the anime than in the manga. It's also, there are a lot of more stuff in the anime that it's there just to advertise some games, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of it not a lot, but some of it
There are
is
some stuff.
advertisement, but they still manage to play it in a way where it's like, okay, it feels believable.
Yeah, yeah. So who's best girl, Ono or Hidaka?
Oh god, that's so hard to say. Honestly, I really do love Ono.
Okay, you have good taste, man. I actually I actually was my first Android. I actually bought an Android from Ono.
Aw.
So yeah,
And she
minigames.
no, she is adorable. Like, I guess I really do love the quiet girls. 'Cause I myself happen to be a pretty quiet person in general, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's my friends, like there's a thing that 4chan always says where you have to hide your power level when it comes to, like, being obsessed with gaming, and that's usually how I am when because I have no troubles adjusting into society, like, when I'm out,
Yeah, of
like, at
course.
work or anything, I don't have a problem, like, I can actually adjust and talk to people about outside things because, like, my job requires me to know a lot about sports because my workplace we do graphic designing for sports apparel, so
Mm-hmm.
I have to know about teams and whatnot, and that also has me going to sport events. Like, I actually did go to watch the Miami Heat live because we have done clothing for the Miami Heat lineup.
Oh, okay.
So, like, but even then, when I'm out in the outside world, I still have to hide the fact that I'm sometimes obsessed with games, so I end
No,
up being a
you
pretty
should
quiet
embrace
person
that. You should
overall.
embrace that. You shouldn't really hide it.
No, no. Now, like, little by little, I've started embracing it more,
Mm-hmm.
because I actually have 2 coworkers who are just as obsessed with games as I am. So now I have some brand new friends that have the same interests as I do, and they're the best people I could ever have. I won't call them my super best friends, like my actual close friends that I hang out with, but they are coworkers that, like, during lunch break, I just love driving out with them so that we can just have a chit chat while we talk about our favorite games.
Yeah, that's really cool to have on a
So
workplace
yeah,
and all
so
that kind
now
of stuff.
it feels like now video games are becoming a lot more acceptable. So I don't feel like a doofus, and
Yeah,
and
you
I don't
shouldn't
know
really.
if
You
you like one
shouldn't
of the
really
things that
do
I've
the.
also tried to do. Like, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, no, go ahead, go ahead.
One of the things that I've been trying to do all year long,
Mm-hmm.
like, during the beginning of the year, is like I wanted to improve myself as a person, and one of the things that I
Okay,
wanted to do
that's really
was
noble.
go on a weight loss routine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Because
yeah. I
it
saw
was
some stuff on the on Twitter. You actually did a lot of good progress with that.
Yeah, like, and it wasn't even this year, but 2 years ago, I had started on my weight loss
Mm-hmm.
routine, but unfortunately, during one of the years, I had lost track of my health, and I ended up gaining weight again.
Mm-hmm.
But this year, I wanted to make sure that I would fix that, and not only would I lose weight, but I keep it off and maintain myself. So I actually went from being a 300-pound guy to a 175-pound person.
That's really
And
really good.
so I have dropped more than 100 pounds.
That's
I feel
great,
so much
man.
better, and
That's really really
part of
good.
the reason I'm doing this is because I wanna be a better person, but I also wanna prove that, just because you're obsessed with games doesn't necessarily mean you're some fat basement dweller kinda
Yeah, of
person,
course. That's
like,
a really.
'cause that's actually an image that my family thinks of me, but
Oh,
I've
that
been doing this to
sucks.
prove them wrong. The fact that now I'm able to keep my
Mm-hmm.
job, that I've lost weight, and I'm still playing games and spending time with people outside. It's like, yeah, man, I feel like a much more I feel like, I feel like a better person overall now, like showcasing that there's nothing wrong with enjoying games. Because back then as a kid, I was taught to believe that it is a bad thing because, like, I have a mom who's very judgmental. Like, she'll
Oh,
tell me,
that
like, no,
sucks.
don't play video games because no girls like video games. You're never gonna be accepted like that.
Mm-hmm.
But screw that. Like,
Yeah,
I'm happy
absolutely.
with the
Just
way I
embrace your
am. I'm a better
passion.
person. Of course, I would like to be in a relationship, but that's not important right now. For me, it's more about just finding the inner peace so that I can be happy with myself. And playing games is
Yeah,
what
of
I
course,
do to
that's
keep
the.
my happiness.
Yeah, yeah, that's the number one thing. Like, as long as you're happy with what you do and how you are, that's the important thing. You shouldn't really care about what other people think. Like,
Absolutely.
embrace your passion and go ahead with that.
Yeah.
So just one at this point, I just wanted to ask one last thing. It's a bit of the addressing the elephant in the room.
Sure.
We talked about Bayonetta 1, we talked about Wonderful 101. I think we should also talk about Bayonetta 2.
Um,
So
so
like
if
you like most veteran of Bayonetta 1, you didn't really like Bayonetta 2 because it changed a lot of mechanics. It actually decreased the skill ceiling together with the skill floor. And it also
yeah.
so
So it's
mhm,
no real secret if you
yeah.
follow me on Twitter how much I despise Bayonetta 2. But I should be a little bit more honest here. I actually don't hate Bayonetta 2. I do think Bayonetta 2 is a fun game,
Mm-hmm.
but absolutely one of the things that I don't like about it is how most of the gameplay feels like it's been dialed back. And the reason why this happened was because Platinum Games made it an effort to try to make Bayonetta 2 a much more welcoming game compared to 1.
Yeah, of
Now, there's
course.
nothing wrong with, making a game more casual friendly. I got
No, the thing
no
is that
no problems with that.
yeah, the thing is that most of the time they developers and companies make um, the mistake of lowering the skill ceiling together with the
Yeah,
skill
that
cap,
that
which is
that
exactly
was
what happened with
the
Bayonetta 2.
that was what happened with Bayonetta 2. And honestly, I don't know who is at fault here. It's really hard to say because, like, on the one hand, Bayonetta 2 is a much more spectacular game in a lot of ways.
I
Like,
think
it
the
has
default
better
is with
visuals and the
most,
animation is so much more improved.
yeah, with
But
most
it's
modern
just
games, I
this
think the
just
default is that trying to appeal to everyone, which is not something
yeah,
you should ever do. Like if a game is
that's
for
the
everyone,
that's the
is also
hardest
for no
thing
one.
because when you appeal to everyone, you end up losing the original crowd, and that's
Exactly.
what was happening with Bayonetta 2 because they ended up lowering the skill ceiling. So what was once a game that felt rewarding to be skillful now doesn't really feel all that rewarding. Instead, the game does its best to make you feel good by using some of the more cheaper tactics.
Mm-hmm.
And this is made even more clear when you realize that using items no longer penalizes you.
Yeah, you can
So
use
you're free to just use a bunch of items to just brute force through the game,
exactly.
and more often than not, you can easily get a high score because they also made it where getting a high score is just as easy as hitting an enemy hard. You don't need
Yeah,
to
they
learn
tied it to
intricate
damage, right?
combos. Yeah, you just need to do really high damage because that's what really rakes in the high score.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I wouldn't have a problem with these changes if it kept all those little cool intricate things that I loved about Bayonetta 1. It was
Mm-hmm.
like how we were talking about those things that we would discover that makes the game fun,
Yeah.
like how I'm able to do OTGs in Bayonetta or how I'm able to relaunch enemies in the air, that sort of thing. If they had kept that, I think Bayonetta 2 would have been a much more favorable game for me. But because it's missing that little intricate stuff, and since the game doesn't feel nearly as rewarding to play when you go for a riskier tactic, I just feel like Bayonetta 2 ends up being more of a turnoff. But again, that doesn't mean I hate the game.
Mm-hmm.
I'll gladly say it's bad because, I like joking around that way. If people take it the wrong way, I'm totally sorry, but that's just how I am. If anything, what I do like about Bayonetta 2 is that it has helped bring in a community closer together. Because
Okay.
one of the things that I actually like doing is I like to do live streams with Bayonetta's Tag Climax, where it's a multiplayer game where you and a partner work together to fight off these enemies, but you're still competing for a high score. So it's still fun to watch like players go at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so while Bayonetta 2 may be lacking a system that I want, it's still an enjoyable game to mess around in. It's not the kind of game that I would spend time looking for intricate combos because I just feel frustrated
Yeah,
whenever
of
I
course.
try to do that. It just doesn't feel rewarding to me. That's why I really, really hope that
Yeah,
Bayonetta
that was my
3
question. What do you
learns
hope
from.
for Bayonetta
So,
3?
what I'm hoping from Bayonetta 3 is it needs to be a combination of both games. It needs to take all the good stuff of 1
Mm-hmm.
and all the good stuff of 2. If you wanna make the game casual friendly, that's totally fine, but there needs to be a high skill ceiling to make up the fact that it's casual friendly. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, of
Like,
course.
because it bothers me because I remember some people online saying that they love Bayonetta 2 more because now it's easier to beat the game on the hardest difficulty, and I'm like,
Yeah,
"That's
that's
that's
not the
so
point at all.
backwards." Like, that
That's
you're not
completely
making sense
backwards.
here.
Yeah.
You wanted hard mode to be easier, so then what's the point of playing hard mode? Like, at some point, you need to realize that, you know, if a game says it's hard, then it should be hard.
Yeah, that's it. That's the
You know?
thing. Like, not
Like
every game should
some
be for
people some
everyone.
people,
That's it.
like, get a thrill out of feeling like they're able to beat the game on the hardest difficulty. Because I had a
Mm-hmm.
discussion about this with some people online where some people were being very passive aggressive about this, where they're saying, "Oh, it doesn't bother me that I use items. It shouldn't bother you. Just don't use the items." And it's like, you're missing the point.
Yeah,
Even if
because
I don't use the items,
the game is
you know,
designed around
I
that.
kind of feel like it kind of feels like if you're using the items to get a high score, you're not owing yourself the favor of learning the potential behind being able to do more with the game, you know what
Exactly,
I mean?
exactly.
Because if a game spends more time just giving you a high reward, you know, right from the
Hmm.
start, then it doesn't give you the incentive to go back and get better. Because if you get everything right from the get-go,
Yeah,
then
what's
what's
the point?
what's the motivation behind going back? You know what I mean? So I really hope that with Bayonetta 3, they find that balance where it has the difficulty curve of Bayonetta 2, but it still has the intricate gameplay that 1 offers. You know, if you want to make the game casual friendly, fine,
Hmm.
but there's got to be something in it for the players that
Yeah,
actually do
they need
enjoy
to be.
spending time looking into the in-depth mechanics of a game.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I completely agree, and I
Yeah.
completely. I think I hope they'll go back to one, like to what made one
I
so
do
good.
hope so
Because
too. Like,
I
I
saw
mean,
it with a lot of games I liked, that this want to make games accessible to everyone and make a game for everyone, and
yeah,
that's
like
ruining
accessibility is always important.
ends up
But I feel
ruining a lot
like,
of the vision of most games.
yeah.
And I think one of the example dear to me is Monster Hunter. Like with Monster Hunter World, they the franchise as a whole has changed completely and lost a lot of the stuff that made Monster Hunter so special.
Mhm.
All because all to like cater to a new audience that wasn't really invested. And so you see a lot of people actually similar to what you said with Bayonetta. You see a lot of people saying, "Oh, I never really got into Monster Hunter. It was always too hard. Didn't really understand it. But now with
Mhm.
Board, I'm really into it. I really like it." Yeah, that's because it's not really Monster Hunter. Like it's something completely
Yeah,
different.
it
Not.
ends up becoming something else, and it again, it goes all the way back to what we were saying. It's like a really difficult balance
Mm-hmm.
between trying to find something accessible and throwing in all these little niche things for the players to discover. I mean, action games is always going to have that struggle
Yeah, I
to
think games
bring
in
it.
general should focus more in doing what they want to do and not
Hmm.
trying to be accessible or cater to everyone. Like there is this idea recently about games that should be like everyone should be able to enjoy and play every game, and I think that's completely backwards. Like you have different experiences, and part of the medium as a whole and on the of the art behind the medium is the player. It's the player interfacing with
Yeah.
the game and expressing himself, especially in action game, with the
Hmm.
mechanics and through the game. So if you start to cater to everyone and make everything easy and make everything uh, like cool, automatically cool. So
Hmm.
I'm cool, but you're actually just pressing a button.
Yeah.
That actually loses a lot of the DNA behind the game,
It
and
starts to
not
lose
every
its
game.
identity as a
Yeah,
result.
that's exactly. Not every game should be hard. Like that's not the point. Like every game should focus on what he wants to do and do it
Exactly. Yeah,
fully.
every game should really focus on what it wants to be
And
rather than just
people
catering to
in
because
people, my
there's
opinion.
always gonna be
Yeah, go
like
ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
there's always sorry. There's always going to be a different game for a different audience, you know,
Exactly
like
that.
it really should be like that. And there's nothing
And people
wrong with
should
attracting someone else,
and
but
in my opinion people should stop being so quote unquote entitled and understand that
yeah,
some experiences are just not for them. Like
right.
with all the stuff
This
with From Software and like having Dark Souls should have an easy mode and all that stuff, you're really missing the point. Like it's not like if you don't enjoy a difficult game, don't play them. Like you shouldn't be entitled to play and enjoy everything just because you want to. Like go
it's
ahead,
really
try it. If you like it, good. If you don't like it, go ahead, just play some other games. Like there are so many different games that cater to different experiences. Just go away and play other stuff. You don't really need to play everything. And of
That's,
course,
I mean, yeah, I do.
from the company side of things, like then it becomes
Hmm.
something about selling. Like if we go back to Monster Hunter, Monster Hunter World sold more in the West at least. It sold
Yeah.
absolutely like on a exponential scale more than any other Monster Hunter.
Uh-huh.
So of course for the companies it's a lot easier if they just want to make money. But I think like we need more passionate people at the end once again. Like I think a lot of developer like lost the passion for the game. They
Yeah.
just are in it for the business side of things,
Hmm.
and it's something really. I don't know. It's something it happens to pretty much every medium, but it's really bad to see all this like historic franchise lose a lot of what they made it so special, either for money or to cater to another for another audience. Like
Yeah.
no, that's my rant on this.
No, I gotcha. I gotcha. I agree with you,
Mm-hmm.
but it's so difficult to really see because, like, I'm heavily reminded of the controversy behind the Cuphead because
Yeah.
Cuphead is a game that is just so attractive to look at, and that is a game that attracted a different kind of audience, the audience that loved the cartoons,
Mm-hmm.
like the old classic cartoons. But most of these people were not ready to see just how difficult the game really is.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it's hard to say because I don't want to be a mean spirited person,
Mm-hmm.
and telling people if this is not your game, you shouldn't play it. It's like again, it's such a difficult balance to try to find something. Accessibility will always be important,
Mm-hmm.
but and challenge is also the main core of a game.
Yeah, that's it. It's
So
part of the
it's like
medium. It's part of the medium.
I do think that a game should have various options that allows a player to ease themselves into it. Like I'm not saying like oh just put it in easy mode or anything because that can work for some games but
Yeah,
not
it
all
works for some
games.
games, it doesn't work for every game.
Right. But yeah, I do agree that challenge is a core, and a game should not be catered to someone else just because they want it
Mm-hmm.
they want it to be like that. I mean, that kind of entitlement is really bad. But again, it's really hard because you can easily flip it over and say that we're being entitled, that we just want this kind of game, and that we're shunning out the others. This is always going to be the
In a way,
ongoing
yes, but the thing
debate.
is, I'm not the one like demanding that. I don't know.
Of course, no, I know. Like
Animal
in the end,
Crossing.
we're not the ones
No,
demanding it. Of
just
course.
for argument's sake, I'm not really like. It's not that I'm offended or anything. Like I'm just
Well,
do.
okay.
No, I'm not offended or anything.
Hmm.
Just for arguing sake. Like I'm not the one that actually uh, is demanding like games like I don't know Animal Crossing to have an hard mode. Like
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That would be kind of funny though. Like Animal Crossing European
yeah,
Extreme Edition.
just like I understand that Animal Crossing it's not a game made for me. Like I don't like that type of game.
Yeah. So no,
That's fine.
I get what you're saying.
It's a different experience for a different kind of people, and that's fine. I think that should be
Hmm.
because it's not something that happens with any other medium. Like if you start to read I don't know a classic book of one of these really difficult I don't know like a book from Proust or something like that really difficult book to understand. Like you're not expected to have the book tell you what it's all about. Like the book is not gonna explain to you all
Yeah.
the intricacies. You can find it with the community, with quote unquote the community, either with guides, with people or professors that know that book very well. And it's the same thing with video games. Like if you really want to learn and want to start to understand something, you can go ahead and do it. Like you said, like
Hmm.
there are a lot of people that do amazing work from the community and do amazing tutorials and guides and breakdowns on all the mechanics and all that stuff. So yeah, it's something that really only happens with video games. Like you never
Yeah.
see someone complain that a book is too hard, or that should explain better the stuff, or even a movie. Like you don't see people, oh, I didn't understand that movie. Maybe they should have stopped the movie and have an option to explain everything to me. Like it's something that only
Yeah.
happens with video
Yeah.
games, and I don't know why. I think it's because a lot,
It's
even if
because of the interactivity, because ultimately,
I think, yeah,
like a game is only as good as the player can make it because they
hmm
get the control over the character,
yeah, I think
you know.
that's it. I also think that I'll, it's still not recognized as a as an art form as of yet. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people start
It's
to,
not really recognized as art
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of people
because
start to call it art, but it's still not recognized as that.
because the problem is that like where how would you define art when it comes to games? Because you can
hmm
make a very artistic video game, but does that mean it'll appeal to the people that enjoy the gameplay if there's not
Yeah,
that
that's
much
the thing.
gameplay to it?
To me,
Because that's
to me, the art in video games is the gameplay. Like it's people. It's the only thing. Like the only thing that the main thing that differentiate the video games medium from other mediums is the interactivity. So
mhm,
the beauty of the art to me should be with that interactivity. So through gameplay,
mhm,
uh, exp- uh, it doesn't even need to be hard or challenging. Like even games like Undertale to me are really amazing pieces of art. Not because they are hard or
yeah,
because they require mechanical skill, but because they tell a story that can only work through this medium, because he actually
right,
uses what made the medium so engaging, which is the interactivity and the player being an active part in enjoying stuff. And he
uh-huh,
creates something that you can't really have on in a movie or in a book because it's a different medium. And that's I think where the art should be focused about, because a lot of
right,
modern developer just want to make movie games and just want to emulate movies or emulate books and have these big stories and all this stuff. And you can have big stories, but have that story be intertwined with mechanics. Do something that you really can't do in other medium, and that's where you find really the art in the medium.
yeah,
With stories or with mechanics, you can still do it, but have the interactivity be the central part. That's to me the
mhm,
art of the medium in general.
yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, so we had pretty much 2 hours of talk. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, no, I did.
I really, I'm really grateful for you to be that you when you were on board from the start. You really wanted were on board for the start for my project. I'm pretty much no one, so I'm really humbled when people really are interested in being here, even if they didn't really get anything from it. So
I'm really grateful that you considered me, like
yeah, yeah, of course, yeah.
it's really cool. Like I'm always up for these kinds of things, like because it makes me feel like I definitely am a part of something.
Mm-hmm.
So and I'm always willing to, give my side of the story. And hopefully with this new series of yours, you've run into even more interesting people along the way. So
Yeah, that's
I'm just grateful that, I'm episode 1. The first is the best. Well, technically Rang was the one that started it was 0,
yeah. I was
but
the
I'm
introduction
still
to this.
number 1.
Yeah, you're still number one.
All right, but this was fun, man. This was absolutely great.
Yeah,
So
I'm happy.
again, thanks for having me on
I'm
board.
happy about that. Like I was, I told you already, but I'm always was a big fan of yours. I usually lurk about, but I've always been a fan of yours. I always loved your combo mod, especially for Bayonetta. So I'm really grateful that you were so like ready to be on board with this stuff. So thank
All
you for
right.
being here. Thank you for everyone listening. You can, if you wanna plug yourself, you can tell people where they can find you.
Well, if you want to find me, just look up youtube.com and just go and search up SetnaroX. You'll find a bunch of Bayonetta, a wonderful 101 gameplay, along with some other side projects. Like I'm currently playing Sakuna of Rice and Ruins.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to get to know me a little bit more, you can also follow me on Twitter with the same name. On Twitter, I've started posting up some drawings because one of the things that I want to start doing as we enter 2021 is I want to spend more time drawing. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're curious to see what I draw, just follow me on Twitter. I also use Twitter to post any announcements of when I do streams because every once in a while I do try to stream Bayonetta and Devil May Cry and whatever other game just catches my fancy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're interested in that, check it out. And thanks again for having me on board.
Thank you, man. And definitely check him out. Actually, go watch his videos because you saw some of the gameplay here in the background. But you really should watch his combo mad now and listen to his choice in music, which was always on point. So thank you again, man. Thank you everyone for
All right.
listening. See you next time. Bye.
All right. Have a good one. Later.